I chose to write this because I was realizing that, as you were saying previously, there's not a lot of reporters who want to talk about this. I will say that my reporter friends that are on the right do a really good job of covering this issue. But when it comes to establishment media, there's just an unwillingness to address this issue. And when establishment media does talk about it, what they will say is, you know, less than 1% of people regret their transition, or transition regret is very rare. And they'll also try and imply that people like Chloe Cole are profiting from their activism.
Hello and welcome to the 𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙾 Scoop. It's just me today, 𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙀𝙀. We're still in New York. The October 7th play is still running. It's closing this Sunday. So if you have anyone in New York who wants to see it, needs to see it, if you're in New York, please come along. We're there every night and in the afternoon for the matinees. So go to October7theplay.com to find out where it's showing. There's obviously big news in Gaza, big news in Israel. We'll be coming on to that in the show today. And we'll also be bringing you the exciting news about a job in journalism that's just become available in Gaza. It involves a lot of working from home, apparently. We'll also be telling you the truth about transgender kids. They don't exist, but the cult is destroying their lives. We have an interview with Mary Margaret Olohan, who's just written an amazing book about the tragedy, the scandal, the biggest medical scandal of the decade, actually. And the trial to distract you from the Biden family corruption is ending. We'll be bringing you all the latest with our reporter inside the courtroom. And how important is context? A little story about journalism that I think is really important, and it's important when you go on social media to think about context. And 𝙁𝙘𝙤𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀, that's French, by the way. The lights are coming on all across Europe as the continent swings to the right in the European elections. We'll be bringing you a little summary of that. So, if you listened to our podcast a few weeks ago, you'll remember 𝙤𝙤 𝙈𝙘𝙤𝙀, the story of 𝙤𝙤. 𝙤𝙤 is a character in our play, played by Jenny-Ann Hochberg. And she's one of the Nova Festival survivors we interviewed, and her story is a very, very important part of the play. 𝙤𝙤 actually knows Noah Argamani, one of the hostages who was released last week in Gaza. I don't have much more to say about that, except that the person who was holding her was a journalist. And, that's not surprising to me. I know from covering Northern Ireland that many journalists, some journalists were a little bit too close to paramilitaries sometimes. Some were deadly opposed to paramilitaries as well. But, in all these conflicts, these organizations, they're infiltrating every part of society. That guy's father was a doctor, so she was in a house with a doctor and a journalist. So, but as I said, I think at the beginning, there's now an exciting journalistic opportunity in Gaza with lots of working from home possibilities. I don't know if too many people will be keen for it. Actually, let's go now and look at what 𝙤𝙤 said back then about how she knew Noah and how they felt about the hostages.
And also, can I talk about Noah for a second?
Yeah,
of course. So the reason I became so active for being an advocate for the hostages was because of Noah, and I don't want to say her name wrong. Can you say her last name for me?
𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙀𝙀. No, 𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙀𝙀.
Ardgamani. She's one of the hostages still being held. Her mother is battling cancer, and her video broke me. And she's the reason I'm doing this play. And then to find out that she's friends with her.
Yeah, she is in my university, and she is friends of friends,
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So I know her.
So as I was saying, this is one of the last weeks you'll be hearing about us from New York City, because October the 7th is wrapping up this weekend. But a very exciting weekend, actually. 𝙁𝙤𝙤𝙀𝙀😗, who is a Jewish rapper, came and did a performance after the Saturday night show. Let's have a little clip of that.
I march for BLM, I march for Ukraine, but this time me and my people in the negative brain. See, we used to get punched in the face, but now I do the punching. My family heated cause most of us died in the ovens. I went from what the F they discussing and staying disgusting. Now we hiding from the enemy, children can eat school lunches. Addicted to the internet, they share the sickest image. I put my yarmulke on, not even religious with it. Grandparents, women and children, you terrorist bitches get lost. Pissed off, I'd rather be a man today. So I said bye then, take the billions, then I ran away. Okay, guess what I got Let's talk the fans today. Where's God? Who gon' believe in us? Y'all play detective. Figure out this media, cause every play make a little money off the hype. Roger Waters suck my egg, won't say it tonight. 50 years since 𝙈𝙘𝙀𝙀, put your hands up. October 7th, alright, we live live. Bring the family home, we got the world saying, cry to death, I can't sleep, that's the worst pain. I'll remember tonight, the night the world changed, the line just roared, and y'all heard it like, yeah. Bring the family home, we got the world saying, cry to death, I can't sleep, that's the worst pain. I'll remember tonight, the night the world changed, the line just roared, y'all can't hurt me. This is for social justice, keep on, what about us? For every family member murdered that wasn't counted. I rise up a piece, history shows that we offered first. When it comes to context, that's a new trigger word, and victory is ours. I know my people know the time, so believe it.
I was very impressed with Coach Dills, actually. He's an amazing guy, young man, very, very talented. And I particularly appreciated him, let's just say, restricting some of the language. You know, obviously it's a rapper, and some of the language can get rather choice, and he adjusted his words for the audience, and I appreciated that. I wasn't going to censor him or tell him that he couldn't, but I did tell the audience if they felt uncomfortable with spicy languages, perhaps they should leave. But no one did, and to be fair, I didn't tell Kosha that he had to do anything, and Kosha did that all by himself, and I really appreciated it. But he's an amazing artist, so please go on social media, like him, and support what he does, because we do plays, we do podcasts, he does rap, and it's all a way of getting the truth out there. So, and talking about as you know, October 7th, it tells the story of 14 survivors in their own words. It's a verbatim play based on all these interviews we did in Israel, and it's been amazing to hear the reactions of the audience. And as I say, this is your last chance to get it this week. But if you can't go, look, I have to have a very adult conversation with you. We need funding to keep this play going. We need funding to take it on a college campus tour. We need funding to bring it all across the world. So please go to October7ththeplay.com. You'll see a button for buying tickets, but you'll see a much more important for donation. We need your donations, and we need your significant donations. If you give $500 the last time, give 1,000. If you give 1,000, give 10,000. We need significant donations. The security we had the most amazing security for this play. That sometimes you see a security guard and their uniforms untidy, and you think I wouldn't be, if I was a criminal, I wouldn't be in the slightest bit worried about you. Our security, if I was a criminal, I'd run a mile. They were amazing, but quality costs. And the actors were amazing. Quality costs. The venue was amazing. Quality costs. So please go to October 7th to play and give what you can. And now we go to a very important interview with Mary Margaret Olohan, who is a reporter with the Daily Signal. She's just written an amazing book about people who detransition from the gender cult and detransition, unfortunately, from gender surgery, attempt to gain back what they have lost. It's, as I say, it's the biggest medical scandal of the decade, perhaps of this century. So let's go over and talk to Mary Margaret in detail about that. And we're here now with Mary Margaret Olohan, who is a senior reporter at the newly relaunched Daily Signal, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit as well. We're talking to her today because she's just written a book called Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. Mary Margaret is one of the few journalists willing to report on this, actually, and what actually happens when children are allowed to change their gender and be medicalized for this mental illness. And the book is about what happens when they regret their choices, regret these decisions that they're allowed to take. Mary Margaret has previously written for the Daily Wire and the Daily Caller. You probably know her. She's one of the, I would call her one of the most preeminent journalists about the abortion issue in America today, definitely. I follow her for that reason. She also shares a significant similarity with myself. Do you know what that is, Mary Margaret?
So many things, so many possibilities.
Yes. A personal, a family matter?
I don't know.
Well, we must have discussed this in the past.
I don't know. What is it?
According to your bio here, you're the eldest daughter of a large Irish Catholic family of 11 children. I'm not the
Yes.
eldest daughter. I'm the second youngest son of a large Irish Catholic family of 11 children.
Ah, amazing.
Amazing. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
Kindred spirits. You get it.
Yes. You know, you and I, we meet people and say I'm from a big family, and they say, I say, how big? 6. And I go, ha, amateurs. That's a Protestant family where I come from.
I mean, it's a pretty big family by United States standards,
Yes.
but it's not. You don't need a 15-passenger van for that kind of family.
No, they don't know. They don't know the hardships.
They don't.
So,
No.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining us, Mary Margaret. We have a lot to talk about. I want to talk about the book first. You profiled 5 people who tried to change their gender. Can you tell us a little bit about them? About these people, what did they have in common? Did they have anything in common? And how did it happen? And where were the doctors in all this? Where were the responsible adults in all this?
Yeah, so I profiled 5 individuals for this book. I mean, I talked to a lot more detransitioners than I mentioned in the book, but I thought it would be really worthwhile to give a really intimate, vulnerable look at these individuals so people could understand what their situations were like, what their families were like, what prompted them to make these choices and go down this path. So that's Prisha, Luca, Abel, Helena, and Chloe. Chloe Cole is probably the most well-known detransitioner. And, I get into all the details of what their family life was like, what their social relationships were like, what their social media consumption was like, to try and show how they went down this path in the first place and, how they got their hormones, what their surgery was like, and what that moment of realization was for them when they finally realized, oh my gosh, I'm not happier. In fact, I'm in a worse place than I was before, and I need to do something about it. And I chose to write this because I was realizing that, as you were saying previously, there's not a lot of reporters who want to talk about this. I will say that my reporter friends that are on the right do a really good job of covering this issue. But when it comes to establishment media, there's just an unwillingness to address this issue. And when establishment media does talk about it, what they will say is, less than 1% of people regret their transition, or transition regret is very rare. And they'll also try and imply that people like Chloe Cole are profiting from their activism, and suggest that that's why she's speaking out at all, which is very insulting, to someone who's been through the trauma that Chloe has and is now putting her face and her name out there for everyone to comment on as she shares her story and warns people against this. So it is definitely underreported, and I felt like this was a really good format to dig into their lives and let people get a good view of what's going on.
Yeah, the idea that's so dishonest of journalists. The idea that only certain activists who become famous because of their activism, you can then impugn their motives as if you are active about something, if your issue is important to you and you raise awareness and you become famous, doesn't mean you're in it for the money. And you could say literally that about everyone, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Israel, whether it's the Democratic Party. Everyone wants, it's a definition of success that you've raised your profile, that you can make it your full-time job. So that's a dishonest answer. So just break it down for the people there who haven't read the book yet. And the book, again, is Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. The people you interview, are they all women to men transition, or what was it?
So most of the people that I interviewed for this book were girls who tried to become boys. And, when I talk about this, I usually say they tried to become boys or they attempted to transition, because we know that you can't actually do that ultimately. I did interview a bunch of guys for this book, guys who tried to become girls. But since this is more prevalent with young women, especially as we're seeing in relation to social contagion and teenage girls identifying as transgender in groups together, as Abigail Shrier documented, I felt like it was important to really focus on some of these girls. And Their stories are very
Yeah.
compelling to me as an older sister.
Mm-hmm.
I have, we talked about, I have a big family. I think that hearing about what they went through is just so hard to imagine a younger girl going through this and not having anyone to talk to about
Mm-hmm.
it, thinking this is the solution to her sadness and her mental health struggles. And so I do really lean heavily on their
Yeah.
testimonies, and that does make up the majority of the book. And then, of course, the last chapter is the story of Abby Martinez, the
Mm-hmm.
mother of a little girl, 𝙎𝙤𝙤, who ultimately took her own life
Mm-hmm.
after she was taken from her family, and the state of California okayed her for a gender transition attempt, and she began taking testosterone. And not long afterwards, she knelt down in front of a train and
Mm-hmm.
took her own life. And so I chose to end on that story because Abby told me, she said, this is a pain that never goes away. And she wanted to warn other
Mm-hmm.
people about the realities of what this can do to our children. So the detransitioners in my book are the ones, they made it, and
Yes.
thank God they're doing well. They're trying to resume normal lives and pick up the pieces of what these doctors and therapists did to them. But I ended with 𝙎𝙤𝙤's story as kind of
Mm-hmm.
showing the alternative. What might happen if we keep pushing kids down this route.
So many things I want to pick up on there, but let's kill this idea first. This line, which is a great line, by the way. Would you rather have a girl who's a boy, or what's the line, or a girl
Would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Is what they
yes.
say to
So
parents.
yeah, they're going to commit suicide if you don't pander to the
Yeah.
mental illness. Tell me about that statistic. That
Yeah,
saying.
this is a horrible thing that these gender activists and therapists and doctors will say to parents, because I think what typically happens is, when we talk about this issue, a lot of people probably imagine that this is a very evil parent that is transitioning their child,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a lot stemming from the parents. Unfortunately, that is not true. I think in most cases, what you have is parents who are not very politically savvy. They're not paying a ton of attention to the news. Maybe they're not people of faith. They're
Mm-hmm.
not equipped to handle this situation. And
Yeah.
so when their child comes to them and says, I'm actually a boy and I want to get a double
Mm-hmm.
mastectomy and go on testosterone, and I'm told that that's the best thing to do, they're horrified. They don't want their baby girl to undergo these types of procedures,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know what to do. And so they think, okay, I'm going to talk to a medical professional.
Of course.
And the medical professionals will tell them, you need to affirm your daughter or she's at risk of killing herself.
Mm-hmm.
And what they say is, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a
Terrible.
threat. It's a threat to parents that
Mm-hmm.
if you don't comply with our ideology, your child will die and it will be
Mm-hmm.
your fault.
Yep.
And it's incredibly manipulative. It's not true. It's a
Not true.
lie.
Yeah.
We're finding out more and more evidence that all of these gender transition procedures are incredibly bad for kids, that they're very detrimental to their mental health, because all of these kids already have mental health issues to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So they're only compounded by these procedures. And the surgeries, first of all, are irreversible, but the hormones have lasting effects on
Of course.
fertility, on their bodies, on their bone density, on their muscle structure, all of these things. They're experimental, like
Mm-hmm.
legitimately experimental, which the so-called experts have been exposed to know. The recent release of the WPATH file shows that these so-called experts were aware that testosterone was causing girls to develop tumors. They were aware that testosterone was making girls infertile, and they were aware that a lot of these kids can't actually give informed consent to these procedures because they are so mentally unwell.
Yeah.
But they're just, they're keeping those things under wraps. They talk about them privately,
Mm-hmm.
and publicly they say gender affirming care is crucial for trans youth.
Yeah.
So there's
Crucial.
a lot of manipulativeness going on here, a lot of duplicity, and unfortunately, the parents are trusting medical professionals. And now I should add, there definitely are parents out there that are transitioning their children out of a desire to promote themselves.
Yep. Yep.
But the stories that I told, that was not the case.
Mm-hmm.
This was coming from social media, from therapists, from schools, and that was the real cause of these kids going
Yeah.
down this path.
Well, Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a very real syndrome, and this is a perfect vehicle for those kind of parents who want to be constantly medicalizing their children and have the martyr hero complex.
Oh, yeah.
So, but the ones you dealt with are not that. But believe me, they exist, and
Right.
we should be aware of those as well. No, these are well-meaning parents who are told by professionals. I mean, this is anecdotal, but it's true. I obviously don't want to ask you your age, but I look at you and I see that you're probably a bit younger than me, a few years perhaps. And when I was young, in my 20s, the diseases that young women got then, or in my teens, were anorexia and bulimia.
Yeah.
And again, it's a very, this is a layman's thoughts, but it's a very similar thing. It's about controlling your body and not wanting to grow up and not wanting to become a woman and whatever it was going on in their minds at the time. But it was very, very damaging and very, very serious and really unstoppable. It was really a tough thing they needed so much help to get over it. And you meet some of them now. I meet these people now, and I'm not sure they're still over it. There's still stuff going on, but no one ever suggested that the answer to that was to tell them they're a hero for being so thin.
Right. No, that's
to
actually
affirm your anorexia. It was never. It was seen as a deadly mental disease. That's a deadly threat to their well-being.
I think that's one of the best parallels, anorexia, because, Prisha, one of the girls in my book, legitimately was very anorexic. It was something she had struggled with for a long time. In fact, one of the factors contributing to her gender transition was that she was tragically raped when she was a child. And she became pregnant as a result of this rape. And because she was so anorexic, she couldn't sustain the pregnancy and miscarried the baby. And all of this, of course, is deeply traumatic for a young girl. But she told me that her anorexia was never mentioned in the context of her gender transition by the therapists and doctors. There weren't discussions of it. But when she was anorexic, the therapists and doctors that she would meet with would tell her, no, you need to feed yourself. You need to nourish yourself. You're hurting yourself by not feeding yourself. And she's in all these online pro-anorexia groups that were talking about the topic. And, you would post progress photos of basically of you starving yourself to death. And those very much bled into the online transgender groups because they also post progress photos of how their body was changing or, the surgeries and things like that. But when she went in for her double mastectomy, part of her decision to do this was informed by a desire to lose 8 pounds by having her breasts removed. And the
Sorry
doctor,
for laughing. I mean, sorry for laughing there, but that's almost comical. I mean,
it's really sad, because she's thinking, she's so mentally unwell that she's thinking this is the right route. And the doctors are so ideological that they're ignoring her actual issues and prioritizing ideology over everything else.
I mean, they say comedy is tragedy plus time, and it almost gets into the farcical if it wasn't so sad. This story, and so how did you? So you sat down with 5. Well, you sat down with many more. You chose 5. How much time did you spend with them? How deep of a dive will people see in this book?
Oh, we spent hours and hours talking over their stories. I spent a very long time talking to each of them and learning all the details, going over and making sure I had everything right.
Yes.
Because I really did want to do that with this book, is tell their stories, enable them to share their stories with the world in a way that they can't do. And, maybe a short news hit on television, you only have maybe 3 minutes to get your point out. But I wanted to get into all of it. And so, this is definitely a long drawn out project. And I made sure I went over all these details with them because it's a huge responsibility, telling such a tragic and emotional story. And for many of these individuals, this is the first time it's been laid out so thoroughly. So I took a lot of, I took that very seriously, and I hope that people can benefit from reading this and understanding what they actually went through.
Well, everyone listening to this now is shouting at at their laptop or phone saying, "Film, why aren't you talking to Mary Margaret about making this a verbatim play?" I mean, and I'm serious because it is, and so we're doing October 7 at the moment, which is the story of people going through the worst day of their lives, the worst experience of their life, coming out the other side. And it's a story of hope and resilience. It's also a story of tragedy. And as you're sitting here telling me this, I thought, that would be a great role for 5 female actors, maybe a couple of mother figures,
Yeah.
some of the actors playing, we can talk, as I say, we can talk offline about this, but to me, if you have these tapes of these people talking, it's another way of telling this story. Anyway, that's for another
really
day.
Amazing.
Yeah, but and people need to know this story in every way they can, in every format that they go to. Some people don't read books, some people go to plays, some people listen to podcasts. So anyway, we'll talk about that offline, as they say. So where were the doctors? The doctors were just affirming that. Was there anyone shouting stop for these young women? Anyone?
In some cases, they did have some roadblocks, which should have triggered them or showed them that they should stop. For example, Chloe and her family met with an endocrinologist who said that he didn't think she should go on testosterone or puberty blockers at such a young age. And they sought a second opinion because they had been told that she needed this so-called care, or else she would be she would be suffering and she'd be at risk. And so they sought a second opinion, and they were told what they wanted to hear, and they moved forward with her transition. But in general, these young people didn't have any advocates who were saying, "Don't do this. This is what I experience. I know that this is not going to help you." And so that's part of the reason they're speaking out now, is because they didn't have anyone to warn them. And so now they want to be the warning sign for other people and to be able to say, I lived this. I can tell you that you're being manipulated and lied to. Don't fall into the trap like I did. And I think that's why it's particularly emotional to me, is that they're trying to be the warning that they didn't have. And so that takes a lot of bravery, takes a lot of guts, to have your name and your face out there on the internet forever associated with this tragedy that you've been through. So they're incredibly brave, and I think they deserve a lot of praise from us and empathy.
Yeah, no, but presumably then the progressive movement has embraced these transitioners with open arms, and said, "Oh, please tell your story to all these transgender kids, because we need to hear it from all sides," or
Yeah. No, well, I think we would expect that, right?
Yes.
But in the establishment media is not interested in telling these stories because the voices have become so loud. They finally did, I believe, the New York Times and the Washington Post each did a profile on detransitioners, but they will always have caveats. For example, they'll tout this fake statistic that less than 1% of transgender people regret their transition. Well, they're talking about people who currently identify as transgender. So that statistic in and of itself is nonsense, because you're talking about people who identify as transgender. You're not talking about detransitioners. So that's a population that you're polling that is the wrong population, and they know that. But it's a statistic that's touted by all these pro-transgender groups. Researcher Lisa Littman did a study recently, several years ago actually, and we need more information on this because detransitioners are understudied, because they're they don't fit the narrative, so it's not a population that is studied the way it deserves to be. But Lisa Littman did a study on detransitioners, and she found that only 24% of the population of detransitioners that she interviewed actually went back to their doctors and said, I detransitioned. And the reason for that is because these are the doctors that, let's just say, removed their breasts, removed their genitals, lied to them and said, this is going to be good for you. This is going to make you happier. So in a sense, it would be like these detransitioners going back, someone who was abused, going back to their abuser and saying, I don't like that you abused me. I just want to let you know that I'm all done letting you do that. And in this, so it's not surprising that they would not go back to their doctors. And many of them don't speak out, so we don't even know where they are or who they are.
Well, that's what the CAS report, I think, in the UK found, was that there was no follow-up on so many of these patients.
Right.
They just were
Right.
allowed to disappear into the ether. And of course, the ones that they allowed to disappear into the ether are undoubtedly make up a large proportion of the detransitioners, the regretful
Right.
ones.
And it's incredibly sad because we don't know how they're doing.
No.
We don't know if they're suffering, if they need help. And the lack of follow up is, I think, indicative of the fact that these doctors are not really that concerned about their patients unless they fit their ideological narrative. That is, trans women or trans women are women, they have thriving lives, blah, blah, blah. Like the whole happy narrative on
Yes.
all of this
Yep.
that doesn't take into account the real suffering of
Yep.
this population.
So, unfortunately, I mean, I have to rush through this interview. I feel like there's so much to be said. What again? I'm just obsessed with these doctors. These professionals. What do you think? Is it a mixture of money, God complex, and ideology, or is it mostly one, or what's the main ideology there? What's the main driving force, or is it a mixture of all three, or is there another one I don't have?
I think it's a mixture. I think that for starters, these people are buying into this ideology. They think that they're coming at it from a perspective of empathy, that they're enlightened, that these hateful Christians and traditionalists and right-wing commentators want trans people dead, which is not true. I think that many of the conservatives I know are some of the most empathetic and loving people I've ever met. They're just realistic about biological realities. And so these doctors and therapists think that they're enlightened and that they're doing a service to humanity. But then I think there's also absolutely a financial incentive. These surgeries and hormones are very costly. And then there's absolutely a spiritual element to it, in that a lot of these people are subscribing to this ideology as if it were a religion. And that was part of the reason that I used the word gender ideology cult in my subhead, because this is very cult-like. The way that the young people are love bombed and encouraged to enter into this transition world, and affirmed and told, you're amazing, you're so persecuted, you're a victim. And then as soon as they realize that this is all a lie and they try and talk about it, they're told, you're no longer welcome in our circles, you're a traitor, you hate us, you want us dead. And so there's a lot of cult-like aspects to it that make me think that there's a spiritual force at play here. And that's very, very scary.
Yeah. And it's getting scarier. Like, we're based in California, and the laws there are, even if your parent is wise to the scam, they're now allowing children to cut the parent out of any decision. That you can go to your teacher or your doctor and cut the parent out. And if the parent opposes transitioning the child, really, that's child abuse, isn't it? The child can be taken, that's the proposal, or is that the law in California now?
I believe that's the law now. Although I believe Newsom, I need to double check my facts here. I think Newsom vetoed it. But in some states, it really has become an issue where the state can take your child away if you are not agreeing to their gender transition. That counts as discrimination. In Washington state, they have laws that help kids to run away and become homeless, and then they will help the children to undergo a state-funded gender transition without the parents' consent, and the parents have no ability to stop it. So this is it's really, that is the new frontier for this issue. And so parents who notice any kind of thing like that going on with their children need to be very, very vigilant and wary. And if there's any hint of that in your child's school, I would highly recommend that you remove them, because once you get that ball rolling, it's very hard to stop it.
Yeah, that is something that I know from personal experience, that once the child is on the treadmill, it's very hard to get them off, because everything you're saying is part of it can be spun to as against the child. The child is told to expect this. That's part of almost the transition process, is the opposition of the parents. So therefore, it's almost reinforcing their transition process rather than stopping it. I mean,
Absolutely.
you say you ended with the very tragic suicide of this girl. Why did you do that?
I ended with 𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤's story because I wanted to show the alternative to what these other young people had experienced. You know, they thankfully are doing well. They're advocates. They're speaking out against these procedures. But 𝙤𝙤 didn't have that. She was pushed by her school and her school officials and her transgender friends down this path. They helped her say what needed to be said to get her removed from her family, and she ultimately committed suicide. And tragically, the LGBTQ advocates in her life fundraised off her death for trans youth who are persecuted by their families. Her mother told me this, and I saw the GoFundMe, and it was so tragic that this is how her death was being weaponized. So her mother told me, I want people to understand what I have been through so that no one else has to go through this pain. And I thought that, you know, as sad as that is, it was a good note to end on, because people do need to be aware. This is not a joke. This is not trivial. This is not a phase. If you do not take this seriously, it can have massive consequences. So, you know, 𝙤𝙤's story is a warning, and I think we should all learn from it.
Yeah. Well, on that note, thank you for coming on the show, Mary Margaret. The book is called Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. How can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X or Twitter at Mary Margaret Olohan, or you can follow my work at dailysignal.com, and you can find the book on Amazon.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you very much, and we will, I'm sure, hopefully this is a story. But is there optimism? Are we seeing? I suppose I should ask you that.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that the truth is starting to come out. Do you think there's a reason to be optimistic?
I do. I think that the legislation all over the United States is a reason to be optimistic. All of this legislation protecting children. I think that the detransitioners speaking up is incredibly powerful and is probably the greatest weapon against this gender ideology. And I would also say that the lawsuits that some of these detransitioners have filed are huge. And they are going to, I hope they will be massively successful in calling out these doctors and these therapists who did this to them.
Well, thank you, Mary Margaret. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Amazing interview there with Mary Margaret. I could have talked to her forever. The book is Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. And the other story is we have Virginia Abrams, who was our reporter at the Hunter Biden trial this week. So let's go over and talk to Virginia about what she saw at the Hunter Biden sham trial in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, the trial that is supposed to make you think that they're equally punishing both sides, but it's actually a cover-up of the wider Biden corruption. So let's go over and talk to Virginia now. So welcome to the show, Virginia. Normally you're behind the camera. For those who don't know Virginia, she's our long-suffering producer and was really the power behind the Mark Steyn podcast, the Climate Change on Trial, which sounded so wonderful, A, because of Virginia's help with the scripting, and then B, because of the wonderful editing. We thought on both ends made it sound so articulate. So welcome to the show, Virginia, and welcome to the camera.
Thanks. It's fun to be in front of the camera for the first time, and thanks for your kind words about the Mark Steyn Progress podcast. I don't think you're doing yourself enough credit. You were the on-air talent. I was just doing my part behind the scenes.
Well, thank you. Well, we sent you out on the road last week and this week, and to the Hunter Biden trial. Now, I just want to say before we start anything, the Hunter Biden trial is a farce, it's a scam. It's to distract you from the larger crimes of the Biden family. It's to say, oh, look, we prosecuted Hunter Biden for this and we prosecuted Trump for that. And there's so much evidence of corruption. The big guy, the 10% for the big guy, and that was Joe Biden, on the Hunter Biden laptop, which has now been proven to be correct. But let's treat this as a real trial, because it is a real trial also. So tell us what Hunter Hunter Biden is charged with lying on his gun application form about not being a drug addict. Tell us about the feel of the court. Is there a sense that it's a serious court case, or is there a clown-like circus atmosphere?
Right. Right. So, I haven't covered too many court cases, but I will say that this trial, I don't think it really has the feel of a political trial. It certainly feels like it's more on the salacious end of things, like a celebrity trial, something like that. Because honestly, what they're talking about doesn't really have anything to do with politics, other than who is on trial and the family that is making an appearance. So, yeah, I would say the case is definitely has this kind of gossipy, salacious feel. There's a lot of discussion of Hunter's personal life, the personal life of the broader Biden family, and which is very messy and very interesting, complicated, all of these things.
Yes.
So it makes for quite interesting viewing.
Yeah, so Hunter had an affair while he was married. He had an affair with Beau Biden, his late brother, who was going to be the next president after Joe, who died tragically of a brain tumor. But Hunter then had an affair with Beau's widow and introduced her to crack cocaine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what she says now in court, that she was introduced to him with crack cocaine. So stay away from the Bidens, basically, if you want a healthy life. It sounds like how strong. Well, what Bidens have been there, and how strong is the case?
Yeah, so it's truly a family affair. There have been many Biden family members who I could tell from when I was there. There might be more that I didn't recognize. These included First Lady Jill Biden, who was there on.
Excuse me, Dr. Jill Biden.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, the magnificent Dr. First Lady Professor.
Yes.
Jill
And
Biden.
every time you speak, hug your forelock.
So she was there. She was not there Thursday because she was in France, and then she for D-Day stuff, and then flew immediately back to the trial. So certainly a big show of support having the First Lady there. Also present have been, and these are just in the gallery. This isn't even getting to the witnesses. So the Hunter's aunt, Valerie Biden, who is the younger sister of Joe Biden, has been there both days that I was there. And then one of her daughters, so one of Hunter's cousins, I couldn't tell which one. She has two or three daughters. And then I believe James Biden was there. So the younger brother of Joe Biden. And then if we get to the witnesses, we have 𝙁𝙤𝙀 Biden, who is Beau Biden's widow and Hunter Biden's ex. And she testified on Thursday with some very shocking testimony. And then the defense actually called Naomi Biden, who is Hunter Biden's daughter, on Friday. And I don't think her testimony really worked in favor for the family.
Yes. Actually, we should say to people, you've been reporting on this case in our Substack, stories.io. So go to stories.io and you'll see the reports in detail. So you were saying that basically the young Biden was there, the daughter was there to say, oh, he wasn't really using drugs when he had the gun, and then she was sort of going, well, he kind of was, because he.
Right. I'm not entirely sure what the defense's goal was with calling her, because what they have to prove is that Hunter was at least not using or addicted to crack or any other illegal substances in October of 2018. And they called her to give some kind of timeline involving his truck, which is where 𝙁𝙤𝙀 then later in October found the gun and drug paraphernalia and all sorts of things. And Naomi, his daughter, testified that she had actually had the truck until around mid-October, like October 18th, 19th. And she testified under oath that she has never used drugs. She didn't put any drug paraphernalia in the car. She certainly didn't put the gun in the car.
Yeah.
And so I really don't know why his defense called her. I think they were maybe trying to prove that there was some other way that.
Well, I suppose they could say there was other people had access to the
right, exactly.
The
but
so
unless she
could have been
she proved that.
Well, it could have been one of her friends. Could have been somebody in DC. Did she lock it properly every night? All this.
Right. Well, she also testified that the console where Hallie then found the gun was in perfect working order when she had it, and Hallie said that it was busted open and unable to close when she went through Hunter's car. So who
Yeah.
knows,
Yeah.
honestly.
So is my old nemesis Kevin Morris there? Was he there? So Kevin Morris, just to let people remind people, he's the lawyer who infiltrated the Hunter Biden movie set, posing as a South Park documentary filmmaker whilst he was secretly working as a lawyer for Hunter Biden. We have an ethics complaint against him at the California Bar Association. So was he there?
Yes, he was. He was always sitting in the second row right behind the family, seemed very comfortable with the family, very close with them. Yes, he
Yes,
was there
I
every
was I was
day.
most interested. I don't know if you saw the New York Post has a story that his daughter is very upset about him bankrolling Hunter Biden. Now that could be just daughters who do get rather upset when their parents give away their inheritance, especially spoiled progressive daughters. I've noticed, and so that could be just personal, or it could be. I mean, there's a famous scene in the Daily Mail where Hunter Biden arrives at Kevin Morris's house up in Malibu, up the road from us at home, and 5 minutes later, Kevin Morris arrives out on the balcony smoking the biggest bong you've ever seen. Now, Kevin Morris is a liar, but I spent many hours with Kevin Morris, the documentary filmmaker, and I don't know if this is a real person or not. And he told me about his extensive addiction problems. And we discussed.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we discussed whether he should. I thought he should make a documentary about addiction, especially as he was making one about. He told me he was making one about Hunter. I thought addiction is a much more interesting issue than many things, you know. And so here he is. This is the person that Hunter Biden is getting money from. Is his new best friend, a guy who is smoking the minute he comes into the house, goes out on the balcony and smokes a bong. This is not a good person to be around if you're an addict.
No, clearly not, since he was giving him a total of $5 million over the course of years. So obviously bankrolling this very expensive habit on top of being bad
Well,
influence.
he gave Hunter Biden, and this is a trial coming up in LA in the fall. He gave Hunter 2 or 3 million to pay his tax bill, and Hunter decided not to pay his tax bill, and is now facing charges for not paying that tax bill. So it's this is not a healthy place to be anywhere close to the Bidens. The judge, if we're going to compare it to the Trump trial, which we shouldn't because it's not the same, because this is a trial to deflect from the bigger crimes as opposed to the Trump trial, which is a trial about no crimes. Is the judge biased in this, or is he pro Hunter, or what's the story with the judge in this one?
Yeah, so Judge Mary Ellen Norica, I'm not sure how to say her last name, but she I think has been very fair to both sides. She's actually the judge who stopped Hunter's plea deal last summer, I think it was, and that was big news because I think his lawyers just expected to hammer out some plea deal. Their client's the son of the president. This isn't going to go to trial, and she said absolutely not. I'm not taking this plea deal. And
well, listen, we have to go, but I mean, the plea deal was unbelievable. You remember it? It was, yes, he pleads guilty to this, gets a slap on the wrist, but he cannot be charged with anything else ever again about anything. Isn't that really? That's what she objected to.
It was something like that, yeah. And so she's played it very fair in the courtroom. Honestly, there have not been many objections from either side. At least compared to the Stein trial.
Yes.
And she definitely is not. She's not giving sweets to either side.
Okay. Well, on that, listen, keep us informed about the progress of the trial. It's more fun than anything else. I mean, as I've always said, I feel sorry for Hunter Biden in many ways, although he has no humility. But why would he have humility when no one's demanded it of him? He's been enabled by dysfunctional family and dysfunctional friends, and Hunter Biden. These people are the last people Hunter Biden needs, and this defense is the last thing Hunter Biden needs. But he doesn't need my advice, obviously. I mean, the man admitted to his guilt in his memoir. He wrote about his crimes in his memoir. So to plead innocence now is it's a joke. But you're Biden, and you're allowed to talk out of 6 sides of your mouth. So thank you, Virginia, and keep us updated.
All right. Well, back back behind the camera I go.
Well, there's going to be a lot more news about Hunter coming out, but not the real news. We're going to have a tax trial in California. We'll keep you up to date on all that. But by the way, if you want to know the truth about Hunter Biden and the Biden family corruption, go to mysonhunter.com. Watch the Hunter Biden movie. That's verbatim, based on his laptop. Oh, actually, we didn't even get talking about that. The laptop that has now been proven to be correct, and not one of the media organizations that called it Russian disinformation have apologized or corrected the stories. And speaking of evading details, there's this viral video. Let's watch that viral video.
Oh! Oh my God. Stop. You're an asshole. You are a horrible person.
Man hits woman. He's probably going to lose his job, or he's definitely been suspended. I pointed out on Twitter that this video is suspiciously edited. If the story is so strong, why does it suddenly start with the punch and not the run up to it? It's just struck me as odd. And also then you see when the man walks away, you see that his jacket is covered in a liquid. What was thrown at him before? What happened before? What was he punched? Was an object thrown at him? What is that liquid? We do not know anything like that. If you fire a liquid at someone, was it a bottle? If you try to assault someone, they have the right to defend themselves. So I know there's a witch hunt and there's a mob to get this guy to lose his job, but that video is undoubtedly misleading, and you have to be very careful with these online videos. And whether it's Joe Biden stumbling over his words or a man punching a woman for no reason in a New York street, please be very careful. Please, and I think this has happened before. I've seen lots of Joe Biden videos, and then I saw them actually before the last election. And then when he went to debate Donald Trump, he was fine. I mean, I wasn't great, but he was fine. There was a different Joe Biden on that stage than we had been led to believe by online videos. So just be careful about small clip videos on the internet, and ask for the longer version every time. And if they won't give it, that's because they're hiding something. So listen, see you next week. Please go to october7theplay.com, give what you can, and or come to the play and meet us. Thank you. Bye.